Josh, I have to tell you, just about every tweet that you put out there, whether it's through Project Liberal or your own, I agree with 100%. I will also tell you too, the last time you were on here, which I think was earlier in the year, that's like right after the election, and I had just re-registered as no party preference in California. There's no such thing as independent here, but that's basically it. And I know that you were trying to work on me to get me to jump into the Democratic Party, and I said, I don't know about that. But now I'm starting to look, and I'm wondering, because I'm seeing what's going on. But we want your take on all of this too. And I know Jacob and Ian both had some questions, and I think Xander, our other co-host here too, will as well too. But I just wanted to read to give you a proper introduction from your website, Project Liberal Action. Authoritarianism is on the rise. Authoritarianism is resurging across the globe, threatening the foundations of free societies. From nationalist strongmen to theocrats and centralized state control, illiberal forces are dismantling individual rights and democratic institutions. These movements prey on fear, division, and misinformation to consolidate power and silence dissent. History has shown that every time authoritarians gain control, prosperity declines, freedoms vanish, and lives are lost. If we do not act now, we risk watching centuries of liberal progress unravel before our eyes. So with that, we have Josh Eagle of Project Liberal. Tell us a little bit about Project Liberal, and also tell us where we're at right now with what's happened to the Republican Party, and in your view, where do us as disaffected Republicans go now?
Yeah, so I can, if it's okay with you, I can start a little bit about my background for those of
Please,
those in the chat that weren't here, because actually our background's very similar. So I was coming out of high school and college during the Great Recession, and I was animated by what I would call now right-wing populist sentiment. I was a big, I would consider myself a Republican in 2012. I was a big supporter of Ron Paul, and later supported Rand Paul in the 2016 primary. Obviously more of a classical liberal libertarian. I would have used the word libertarian 10 years ago, but I considered myself squarely on the right in American politics. And watching what's happened over the last 10 years to the Republican Party and watching them abandon pretty much every single commitment they have to what would be considered classical liberal values, and then watching the culmination of January 6th made me realize how existential it is for the country that we have to have a cross-partisan coalition against the Republicans. It was clear to me in 2021 after January 6th that Donald Trump was uniquely disdainful and contempt, and had nothing but contempt for the Constitution. But it wasn't until 2024, when you and I connected last, Chris, that I realized that something much bigger was needed, because he won the primary again. So we can get more into that later. But yeah, my background is from the Republican Party now to the Democratic Party over a period of about 10 or 15 years, and a lot of interesting discoveries that have happened along the way, and as I've kind of transformed and really refined my worldview. But as it relates to Project Liberal was founded, we started it in 2023 because we believe, our leadership team believes, that we're in the middle of a political realignment across both the United States and the Western world. The coalitions that everyone on this call grew up with, which was what I would call a conservative libertarian alliance against the excesses of the left, the progressive left, and the radical left. These were the dividing lines of American political life, basically since the Reagan era. And what's happened over the last 10 years, and I think it actually started around 2015, and this has happened in the US and the UK and various European countries, is there's a new coalition forming, and there's a new dividing line in politics. And in the way that the dividing line in politics, the two major poles were about disagreement on economic issues. It was about, what do you believe the size and scope of the state should be? What are your opinion on tax rates? The dividing line in politics today is not economics at all. It's about whether you believe in the basic principles of the Enlightenment, whether you believe in our institutions, the concept of individual liberty, and whether you reject it. And so I've pulled a lot of my inspiration and work from Professor Steve Davies, who it works out of IEA in London. And he basically has articulated, and he said this 10 years ago, that the dividing lines now are effectively what is a cosmopolitan. You could think about it as like a center-left liberal, center-left moderate, and center-right alliance against what is a populist authoritarian coalition. So to say that, I think the best analogy for that is what everyone is probably on this call recognizes, which is the horseshoe meme. There's a weird convergence between the sentiments of the far left, this degrowth, skeptical about technological progress, skeptical about immigration, skeptical about America's role in the world. There's a convergence between the sentiments that we would have seen on the radical left and what we're now seeing on the radical right, which is also a degrowth, anti-immigrant, close down the borders, isolate ourselves from the world sentiment. And we can get much more into this and unpack the kind of the values that underpin these two groups. But in a nutshell, me and Jonathan Casey, who was a co-founder of the project in 2023, we had this theory that if somebody could articulate a value set for a new coalition that could bring together the center left and the center right in defense of America's institutions against the populist extremes, that it would have the potential to become one of the most important and salient political movements in the country. Now, we're not arrogant enough to think that we have the resources and power needed to do something like that, but we knew we needed to do our part. And so we started Project Liberal. Over the last 3 or 2.5 years, we've started a C3, Project Liberal Foundation, which is actually about to launch its first major campaign thanks to a grant that we just received. And Project Liberal Action, which is what everyone recognizes. The Project Liberal page is a Project Liberal Action product. And then we also have a PAC. So happy to dig more into that, Chris, but that is the background.
Thank you for unpacking all that. No, appreciate it, so that it's good information going forward for everybody in the space and on the call. Jacob, you want to dive in? I know that you had some questions for Joshua a while back.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris, for tossing it over. And definitely, I think we've seen a lot of developments over the last year, Josh, that really are underpinning that thesis of, you have this liberal center where the differences between center left and center right all of a sudden seem pretty marginal and inconsequential. And then you've got these, variously described as populist, authoritarian, isolationist movements on both left and right. Although the left one, at least in the United States, seems to be a lot smaller. Maybe we can unpack that a little bit here. But for people, right, so a lot of times there's a lag in people's understanding of these paradigm shifts and how things have changed, right? And, when I'm still having political discussions, particularly with conservatives, a lot of them seem to think that, with, MAGA seemingly in trouble right now, with some of the cracks coming in that we're seeing over on the MAGA side, that they can shoot for a restoration of conservatism as we understood it pre-2016. How viable do you think that is, or what's your argument to those who think that are still thinking in the old paradigm and really opposed to, say, moving to the Democrats?
I could have understood that argument a bit more in 2021 and 2022 when Trumpism was on the decline. This is why I say January 6th was a big moment for me, but Trump getting the nomination again in 2024 was also the moment where I was like, I think this thesis is true. I could say that the people that are in this call are great examples of the principled conservatives that have stepped away, for the most part, from the Republican Party. The constituency for conservatism within the Republican Party is a minority view, and it's made up of a bunch of people that have sunk cost fallacy, that believe that if they just hold off long enough, they're going to return to some sort of golden age 20 or 30 years ago. And meanwhile, the young activists and the party operatives that are rising in the party wholly reject the principles of conservatism. And for those actual conservatives, they're going to find this is more and more of a pipe dream as these young activists take more and more control. Not to mention that, you know, the thing that I believe is that when you look at like the dividing lines from a value set perspective, we're in this weird period of flux and chaos. But what we're going to see is we're going to see either a cosmopolitan liberal agenda juxtapose a populist authoritarian agenda. I feel like you're going to see that there's no way the nexus of that coalition is going to land in the Republican Party, because the Republican Party has built a constituency that outright rejects liberal principles. So it's just like, I guess I would describe it as a pipe dream, because I don't think the trajectory as it relates to the voters, the activists, the operatives in the party, the infrastructure of the party is moving in that direction in any way. I think we're farther away from that than we've ever been. If principled conservatives had stones in 2016 to actually fight back in a meaningful way, if they weren't extracted from the party, resigned, quit, gave up, you know, we could have seen a different world, but that's not the world that we're in. These people have completely, for those, I mean, again, I was a Republican, many of the people on this call are Republicans. We're all now, I don't think any of us now are going to be voting for a Republican candidate or even a J.D. Vance in the future. J.D. Vance is not a principled conservative. He's a post-liberal, right? He rejects the basic principles of conservatism. So, I don't know. I just look at the trajectory. Like, I look at all the momentum, and I just don't think that makes any sense. I think that's kind of like a wish. It's like wish casting. It just doesn't. It'd be nice, but it seems unlikely.
Yeah, so I do want to, you gave me a couple threads there I want to pull. And the first one sort of is, right, so MAGA, I think we can accept an understanding of is it's a cult of personality really around Trump, right? MAGA isn't going to transfer neatly or maybe at all to some sort of successor, designated or not. And, I think we're seeing a crack up here. So the first part of this is, how are you interpreting this, what we see at least publicly as a MAGA crack up? And what do you think are at least the short-term political implications of that?
Well, I think the better way to look at the moment, because I do think that, I mean, as a liberal, I think that any movement that rests on the strength or the power of one individual is always doomed to fail. So I don't want to be misconstrued by saying I think that Trumpism is here to stay in the Republican Party, because any movement that is based on a cult of personality will always destroy itself. That's an inevitability. But the thing that I'll say is that Trump was not some guy who came in from the outside and just made the Republicans believe the things that they believe. Like, Trump is first and foremost a marketer. He knew what kind of the value set and the motivations that underpinned what is the growing illiberal Republican base. I think they were a much smaller minority in 2016. I think they were probably less than 30% of the party, maybe 40%. But he knew who those people were. He knew what animated them. He had done this for 10 years before with his public persona and public commentary as a commentator. So I don't think Trump himself was like just a guy that came in and took a respectable conservative party and then just like rewrote everything. I think that he just tapped into a constituency, and a liberal constituency that has been growing and growing and growing. And for the first time in the Republican Party's modern history, the party establishment was unable to gatekeep those things, because I think they've been an underpinning ideologically of the Republican Party since the 60s. But he took it and made it mainstream. Now, when he did that, it caused churn, right? Like, so they became a bigger and bigger constituency. There is now this new populist movement on the right, with the nexus is squarely on the right, that's attracting and indoctrinating an entirely new generation of kids. The biggest political organization the political organizations in the world that are focusing on young people are all on the right, and they're not animated by conservative principles. It's like Turning Point USA. It's populism. And so I guess where I'm going with this is like I don't think when he dies those people are going to go away. I think they're going to stay in the Republican Party, and I think that's why you see J.D. Vance like embracing the same demagoguery, the same illiberal principles, remapping his entire worldview because he knows where the incentives are in the party and what's going to keep him in power and give him a chance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think no, though that's I think really gets at it. And then the part two of that is we're talking now about the future, about the way things are trending, and you bring up J.D. Vance, the vice president, and for several years now he's been aligned and helping grow this so-called national conservative faction. They have their national conservative conference, and they've taken over key conservative institutions. I weep for the Heritage Foundation for what it's become. But they're trying to build this alternative conservatism, right? These NatCons. And, when we're talking about the collapse of MAGA and where the GOP goes from here, where conservatism goes, do you think that the NatCons are going to have this larger role and be the successor to MAGA, or are we looking at something more fractured in the future?
That's actually a very good question that I do not have the answer to, because like there's a book that I'm reading through right now that just came out by Laura Field called Furious Minds, which unpacks the different coalitions within the MAGA movement. The National Conservatives are one of the coalitions, but they are not the dominant or the primary coalition. There's a lot of different intellectual subgroups that make up the post-liberal populist right. But I would say that there are three questions that I ask people. Like whenever I'm assessing where somebody falls in the dividing line in the new coalition, there are three like big questions that I think you can ask people that will kind of tell you exactly where they fall on the liberal versus authoritarian coalition. And I think that based on the answer to these three questions, you'll see that Republicans, at least those of which who have not been repulsed by the party, they all fall on one side of this question. And those three questions are basically like, is individual identity something that you discover or create for yourself, or is it assigned to you? Right? It's like, do you believe that people are able to they are inherently given roles in society based on their gender, race, or class, or do they build or forge their own identity for themselves? Right? I think if you talk to modern Republican voters, not many of the Republicans in this call, like I think a lot of us would say, like this is like I think about, I've seen many moderate center-right principled thinkers say, if women want to go work and not raise kids, they should have the right to do that, right? If you are born, like this was the Reagan speech for a long time. Like, we want to see people move up in class. We want to see people elevate their quality of living. If you were born in another country, a country that's, impoverished, it doesn't mean that you are doomed to wear that as a scarlet letter for the rest of your life. Like you are more than your gender, you're more than your race or your class. That's I think the first dividing line. And then the second one, and this is the big one, I think, that really can show you just the fundamental divide now, even within the Republican Party, is should we be open to the world or should we be closed off to the world? Like, do we think cultural exchange and immigration and international trade make the country stronger and more dynamic, or should we isolate ourselves to maintain order? And I think the MAGA right say we should isolate ourselves. Order is the most important thing. We should close ourselves off. Whereas traditional conservatives, Reagan was a massive free trade advocate. This is like the polar opposite from what the Republican Party believes today. And then the third one is globalization. Like, does it improve our lives? Like, is dynamism and innovation something that's good? Like, is AI, is green energy, is the disruption that comes from technical innovation a good thing, or should we go back to the 1950s? Should we just obsess over getting back to a weird 1950s fetishized version of the world and shut all these things down? You could ask those three questions to J.D. Vance. I tell you exactly where he stands. You could ask Trump where he stands on those three questions. I tell you exactly where he stands. Nick Fuentes, same thing. And I think that a lot of traditional even Reagan-esque conservatives, for those of which that actually understand conservatism, do not fall on the same line as the Reagan or as the Trumps, the JDs, and the Fuenteses of the world. And so, maybe I'm being reductive, and I'm welcome pushback on this, but like I look at those three things as the biggest indicators on where you fall on the side on one of those two sides. And it does not seem to me in any way or shape or form the Republican Party is going to move away from that, at least not in the near term. And so, unrelated to your question, but this is why I think the nexus for whoever, for those of us who believe in those, really believe in the other side of those three questions has to be looking to allies on the left.
Let's jump to Ian and then Xander. Ian, go for it. You are up.
Yeah, I 100% agree that as a whole, the Democratic Party is probably going to be the nexus for most of American liberalism for the foreseeable future. But specifically speaking, do you see a path for principled conservatives to actually get elected within the Democratic Party of that pre-2016 Republican ilk? Because I mean, most Democrats are fairly liberal, supportive of liberalism. But I mean, obviously, there's a lot of Democrats now, say Zoran Mamdani in New York or Afton Ben to a certain degree in Tennessee, who are definitely fairly left wing. So, do you think the path for principled conservatives to get elected is within the Democratic Party or as independents or something of that sort?
I'll say two things to that. So the first thing is, I am encouraged when I look at the party leadership as to how big they want the party to become. I mean, I saw one of a major Democratic Party operative, I can't remember the article, this was a month or two ago, basically saying, like, we need to make space in the Democratic Party for the Joe Walshes of the world, the former Republican who's now, whipping votes for the Democrats, as well as the Mamdanis. I am personally uncomfortable with left-wing populism, but I go back to my three questions to decide who are our allies in this moment. And I think that I'm encouraged by the fact that the Democratic Party is welcoming to those on the center right who are incredibly disturbed by the trajectory of the Republican Party. Now, the second thing I'll say is I'm not a political strategist or political operative. I mean, maybe I'm like, some people could describe me that I'm an amateur at some of those things. But like the thing that I've always been motivated about is the ideas. And I look at the situation that we're in and I say, well, like we have to make a choice. So for me, it's not about the end result. It's more about like, what is the best tactical decision in the short term to make sure that our ideas can win and our ideas do not become fully irrelevant. And to that end, I think that if we do not build a constituency in the Democratic Party that believes in free trade, that believes in tolerance, that believes in fiscal responsibility, if we sit on the sidelines and we do not insert ourselves into that conversation, we don't put skin in the game, we don't donate, we don't show up, we don't act, then the left-wing populace is where the energy is going to be, and we will be screwed in the long term. So it's like, I don't know if it'll work, right? But I hope it does. But I know it definitely won't work if, for those of us who have the political views, we sit on the sidelines and just sit on our hands. But that being said, I do think that the Democratic Party will only succeed if it runs candidates that speak to the constituencies of their local community. So like, I do not want a Mamdani type candidate to run in Tennessee. I just had a podcast 2 days ago where we were talking about Afton Bain, and I live in Tennessee. I actually used to live right next to her district. I think we need a Democratic Party in the South that's pro-business and probably pro-gun rights, and talks about Trump's the actions that the Trump administration has taken that undermine small business.
Populism is deadly.
I think that there's a way that those two things can live in like a party that has more regional interests if the Democratic Party will let it happen. So I hope we can make it happen. We'll see.
I tend to be optimistic too.
Liberalism is about
answer.
like
Thank
realistic promises, and populism is about
Appreciate that.
fixing all your problems.
Xander, go ahead. We are collaborating with Project Liberal tonight. You are on the air.
Awesome. How are you doing? I just wanted to kind of step in on that for a second because I want to make sure we're being as precise as we can here. And one thing that kind of grates on me is when people assume that like Republicans are a monolith. I know it gets talked about that way because MAGA is loud and messy and it takes up a ton of oxygen, but I feel like that's not the whole right, and it hasn't been for a long time. You look at the 2024 primaries, 30% of the electorate didn't vote for Trump, and that number's only grown. And not everybody has it in them to switch over to become a Democrat. And I think one of the things that the Democratic Party has to remember is that you don't have to be blue to vote blue. The Republicans for MAGA was a large faction, 30% at least of the people, but like that's not insignificant. That's actually, if anything, bigger than what we thought the progressives on the left are. We're anti-establishment and progressive, like small r, but it's flipped because it's on the Republican side. But I just want to, I feel like there is a part of being lost and forgotten and left behind that people are concerned about in America, and there's a part of me that is inclined to believe that it's on a, people call it the economy, some people call it a price war. I think it's a class war. If you look at the 97% of households make $400,000 or less in a year, and that's the 97%. So that's basically middle-class America, working America, and essential class workers. And I think that's who the message has been resonating.
You're right.
With.
A lot of GOP is like not going to win, and that's why they are. That's why they're resigning like crazy. Even Nancy Mace is thinking about resigning.
Elections, their vote is what swung it. And I'm from New York, and again, from my position, I voted for Mamdani because he represents progressive and anti-establishment. I don't think he's going to get any of his things passed, but he's not a communist, he's not a fascist, he's not a dictator. He wants free buses to freeze the rent and whatever the other thing was. But it's like, okay, so we're not going to get all of those done or any of them. But progressiveness is not about leaps and bounds, it's about baby steps. Like that's what progressive is you're the change to the establishment. On the right, our establishment switched to MAGA. On the left, I don't know where it is because the elections, the New York election was still relatively split, even though Mamdani won. So I feel like I'm not pushing back. I'm just saying, trying to keep the conversation open on the discussion. Because I always feel so deflated when everybody just says, oh, the Republicans bad, liberals good. It's like, well, yeah, but there's nuance to it. So
yeah, you're completely correct. And honestly, I can relate to the feeling like you're on the outside. I mean, I was a libertarian organizer that spent, shame to admit it now, 10 years in a minority party, in a third party, pushing, doing some Sisyphusian tasks to try to see whether we could create some alternative outside of the two major parties. And I can relate to this idea that we don't want to put people in a box. And also say that, as much as I argue with them, I do think that there remain principled conservatives that have a commitment to human dignity and have a commitment to the same Reagan-esque principles that motivated many of the people on this call that still find themselves in the Republican Party because they made a different calculus, right? I think, the only thing that I go back to is that
I
really do look at the Republican Party as, at least in its current form, as entirely lawless, as entirely authoritarian, as wreaking havoc on minority communities across the country, as violating individual liberty, including freedom of speech, economic freedom. It's the most corrupt. It's the most corrupt presidency enabled by the most corrupt party that we've seen in modern history, if not ever. So I am first and foremost a pragmatist. So I think that you have to win people over in the battle of ideas. But the reason why I'm so animated to oppose the Republican Party, even if it means making those kind of policy concessions, is because I think the threat right now is so existential against the Constitution. And so it's really just, it's a calculus, right? But one of the other things I'll say before I go to the next point, that I think you raised a good point about is, for those of us that consider ourselves as liberals, we have to be very intentional, because not only because it's true, but because it's politically advantageous, that to not frame ourselves as the establishment or the status quo. The United States has a liberal tradition. I think that liberal values birth the Constitution, and liberalism is our cultural identity. But the United States has not been lived up to the liberal tradition in the way it should have, right? That's the one thing about liberalism, is it can never be fully realized, right? It is an effort that takes constant refinement. We're always going to fall back take two steps back before we can take 3 steps forward. Screw up the analogy, but like we can't say the status quo is a liberal status quo because it's not. Right, the price of housing is incredibly expensive, and healthcare because we have not embraced liberal economic policy. Right, like minority communities don't feel safe in their home. They don't have economic mobility. They don't have the same rights as other groups in many cases, because we have not embraced liberal principles. So like we have to be anti-establishment because liberalism is an anti-establishment position. It is always seeking to refine on the status quo and improve on it. And I think that we have to take what is, I think, somewhat of a populist energy of like we are dissatisfied with the status quo and channel that to further liberal goals. That's effectively what liberals throughout history have done from the very beginning. I mean, liberalism was birthed as a pushback against the monarchy. That was a radical idea at its time. And it was very different from any system that had ever been developed before.
Just one concern that I've had that I'll raise real quick here, and then we'll go to Redstone and back to Jacob. The younger people, those that are in college, getting out of high school, they're of age to vote now, or were of age to vote last year. A lot of them voted for Trump that were in Republican households. All they've known, and I always thought that this was going to be the thing that might cause Trump to win last year. But the only thing was that a lot of these kids were just barely born when Trump came down the escalator, or maybe they were, a few years old and don't remember 2015. And by the time 2024 rolled around, they are 18 years old and they're ready to vote or able to vote, or some of them are in high school and not quite ready to vote. But you have groups like there's a shadow of TPUSA and other young Republican organizations out there. Not that all of them are bad, but a lot of them are gearing their philosophies towards this America only, America first nationalist movement that we've been talking about here, that you've been addressing so well. So my concern is of this younger generation. It seems like from studies that are being done, a lot of people are leaning more in that direction. They're not following what a lot of us believed in as, the Reaganite faction of the party, the Bushes, the Romneys, the McCains. They think of that as, oh, that's neocon stuff. You guys are for forever wars and, whatever else you want to throw at us, that's what they're saying. So do you see any breakthrough to them, to reach out to them and say, hey, there is a better way than nationalism?
I think before I answer that question, just one real quick point on this. The thing that really scares me the most, though, Chris, to your point, is that there were conservative institutions, and there still are. I don't want to downplay that they have all been co-opted, but Heritage is the best example of an organization that was a conservative institution that funded causes that actually taught young people about conservative values. And I look at what would be a traditional conservative as within the liberal tradition, right? I mean, like, we have disagreements on cultural issues and economics and maybe some cases. But like, if like liberal principles animated conservatives, that's what they sought to conserve, right? Was liberal values, liberal principles, or liberal institutions. But these institutions in the conservative movement have been co-opted. So whatever we're seeing, this slippery slope with young people and the movement's trajectory, it is not the machinery of the movement is not moving in the direction that's going to help young people. But I honestly think the second point is there's a lot of threads to unpack, and I am not in any way qualified to solve this problem, because I think that the fact that young people are so online that we've seen a decline in in-person interaction. I think that we've seen a decline in these middle-level institutions. You could think of communities, these community building institutions. I mean, you could use a church as an example, but there are clubs, there are other things that bring people together. These things are kind of falling apart. I think that that is radicalizing and warping the brain of young people. I think anyone that's online is susceptible to it. I have a brother who's Gen Z, who's 10 years younger than I am, and he tells me about what it's like to engage with his peer group, and it's just an alien world to me. I met my wife before dating apps. I couldn't imagine, right? So there's that, and then, this does speak to something that we've talked a lot about at Project Liberal, which is one of the things that animates a lot of young people right now, for better or worse, is a lot of I think the energy in the populist right is honestly, it's not about making coherent arguments about ideas. It's about taking some sort of emotional, animating, this animated emotional feeling and giving it some sort of outlet for action. So like a lot of the times for the groyper, so to speak, this is animated by like grievance. It's animated by, you can't get laid, or you can't get a job, or you can't get ahead, and all these other people are doing it. We just need to tear everything down. But I think that there's a way to kind of play the vibes game to remind people about these cultural touchstones of the liberal tradition, to say, look, like these problems that seem overwhelming, they can be solved with these types of solutions that many times the policymakers and leaders of our country are not discussing and they're not presenting. And we can be innovative and exciting, and we can show people that there is a different path forward and that there are actual ways productively to solve this. But like, what I think the thing that's causing a lot of this is so much bigger than even those things, right? Like there's a technological element to it. There's a cultural element to it. It's like a lot of it comes down to, I think, the way that personal relationships are fracturing and people are more distrustful of each other. So I don't have a silver bullet answer for that one, but I am really concerned about it for sure.
No, it definitely gets into society for sure, and social mores, and that goes deep. Redstone and then Jacob.
Yeah, just two quick questions. One was about your Project Liberal, the group. You had mentioned something about receiving, I think it was a grant. Are you able to speak more on like where that came from, just out of my own curiosity?
Yeah, I will. I will in like 2 to 4 weeks. We're gonna announce it, and it's actually interesting because we just received a grant through Project Liberal Foundation, and the purpose of the foundation's grant is to do exactly what you guys are talking about. Like we're going to be trying to position Project Liberal as the entry point into liberal ideas for young people, get the organization to a place where we can serve as the on-ramp for like teaching people about liberal principles and bringing them into a liberal ecosystem. And so it's going to be really geared towards Gen Z. Like that's the vision. But if you can sit tight for about 2 weeks, I want to get all our ducks in a row, and we're going to put out a big announcement, hopefully before the end of the year, if not the first part of next year, and hopefully get some people some things to get excited about.
That's great news. I guess that would be the alternative to the young political clubs on campuses now.
Yeah, we're starting it mainly centered around building a kind of a funnel, like a content machine to like get. One of the things that I think, not to get too in the weeds, but one of the things I think that we do, like specifically John Casey is the co-founder. I think we've done a good job of kind of tapping in, going viral. We have I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because we're both terminally online, but I think we have a way of like engaging in discourse in a way that is different than what you see on the left right now, and it gets people kind of curious. And we have an entire kind of content strategy that we leverage that has been pretty successful for us in like getting attention. So what we're trying to do for the next step is take a lot of that attention and translate it into bringing people into a community where they can look and say, look, there are other organizations, there are other events, there are thought leaders that I can connect with, and we're going to start there. So like the dream state for me, Chris, is eventually we do go out and we can get chapters going and we can do that, but like we're trying to walk before we run. So like we've got all this viral energy. We want to take that and start showing people who are the allies here. I mean, like think about it, Turning Point USA, and all these other conservative groups will find ways to get these young people face to face with their heroes. Like, I guess in this case, it's like Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones. Like we have intellectual heroes in our movement, and we're like, why can't we have a liberal organization that gets you to have dinner with Francis Fukuyama, for example, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff that we want to start with, and then scale from there.
Well, appreciate that, because it's like, who do we go to listen to, right? I mean, I used to, listen, well, back in the day for us, it would be Rush Limbaugh, right? I mean, he was the king of kings as far as, broadcasters were concerned. And then, now it became Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire. I dropped all those guys, when they jumped on the nationalist bandwagon. I said, enough, there's nobody to listen to. There's nobody, no thought leaders or, people out there really, promoting or articulating the values that which you are articulating so well. Yeah, and that's the thing that I think,
For us, for a lot of us, like it was, we've considered ourselves classical liberals for 15 years, but we talked about it in the context of the right. And the thing that really shocked me just over the last 2 or 3 years is just how much there's a hunger in a constituency for like a principled and almost radical vision of liberalism that doesn't compromise on individual liberty and economic freedom, that not only has a constituency in the traditional legacy right, but like actually is kind of appealing to young people on the left, you know? And we've had conversations with people who I would describe as like left-wing populists that disagree with us on economic issues, but like I've been shocked at the people on the left that like say, like, look, we're not going to agree on you know, tax rates, but like we have a lot of respect for your like radical and dedicated commitment to the empowerment of individuals. And I've been very hopeful because I do think that like from a core values perspective, there's a lot more hunger for there's a lot more alignment than I always had tension in communicating with the right. Like it was always about economics and it wasn't about like, do we care about people? And and not to get off on a tangent, Chris, but I'll say this, like, if you have a fundamental values alignment with the left, so like if we can go to the left and say, we believe in human dignity, that's our animating principle. We think people should be able to live dignified lives and be able to improve their condition. You can have an argument with somebody on the left who maybe doesn't believe in economic liberty in the way that we do, and you can get more traction because you're framing it around that core principle. I look at economic liberty as one of the best ways to expand human dignity. You could do that on the left, and you can win those arguments. But you know what? If you go to the right, and they don't have the same commitment to human dignity, and they really just kind of feel like they want to screw over their enemies or whatever minority group, and they're mad at you because, you know, you don't think we should put ice in the streets, like you're not going to get traction from a values perspective. The values disconnect is just too fundamentally different for that to even work. And that's been the biggest light bulb moment, I think, for me over the last 2 years, to be honest with you.
Redstone, I stepped on your toes there for a second. You were trying to finish your question. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, not at all. No. So the main question I had was, it's, I guess, somewhat philosophical, but in short, what's your plan? What's your strategy for those that you're working with in your inner circle? I guess to reach out. How do I say this? I guess. I don't think it can be centrist Republicans. I don't, like you were saying earlier, I don't really know how to define who's what anymore. But how do you cut through what essentially I believe has been like a slow sort of brainwashing effect? What is it just going to be attack the concepts of a misunderstanding of how economics really work, or what the purpose of government is? Do you think is the best way to reach what would have been considered a centrist Republican, to convince them that the party that they may vote for, even if they do it while they're holding their noses, is such a danger to the country and their, you know, the future livelihoods that they would hopefully like to have in their children, etc., that they have no other choice but to choose another party? How does that happen?
Yeah, so I think it's a slow game. I will strip aside Project Liberal from this because, like, Project Liberal Foundation is, like, nonpartisan, right? Like, we're focused about spreading the ideas of liberalism. Project Liberal Action, we do have calls to action on political stuff. So I speak mainly for myself in this case because what I've dedicated myself to over the last year or two is trying to bring center-right people over to the left. Or to the Democratic Party, not the left, but like vote Democrat. You know, honestly, I think it all goes back down to actually talking about what in practice, the way the Republican Party is acting. I have a little anecdote that I bring up sometimes where I'm like, you know, if you like, I have many family members that loved Ronald Reagan, right? And friends that are huge Ronald Reagan supporters be like, look, if you look at Reaganism, Reagan would be voting Democrat. And a lot of people laugh at me when I say that, but that's objectively true. Like, he was pro-immigrant, pro-free trade, pro-rule of law, right? There are there are ways, I think, if you kind of cut to the core of, and you can juxtapose what the current administration is and what the Republican Party stands for against what is the traditional Republican standard bearer, or the traditional conservative standard bearer in Reagan. That's something I've used a lot. I think the Ukraine issue is a great wedge issue. I think immigration is a great wedge issue. I think free trade is a great wedge issue. Fiscal conservatism, corruption, and the rule of law. And I think that if you talk about those issues and you say, like, do you first and foremost have a commitment to those things? If you do, then what are we doing here? Like, why are we supporting this guy? And I think, I can't remember who said it earlier, but like, you don't have to be a Democrat, a card-carrying Democrat, to be voting Democrat. I think at the very minimum, I just want people to say, look, we have to put our party label aside in this moment, and we have to make a decision to kind of defend the Constitution. And even if you have the Democratic Party even if the Democratic Party was run by the Mamdanis of the world, I do not believe that even the farther left of the Democratic Party today has the same level of disdain for the Constitution. It was centered around that. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but find those wedge issues. That's kind of the way that I try to.
Basically, yeah, and hashtag Rhino is who brought up the point about, it's not really like the party so much, or lesser of two evils or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of like where we're at. And the reason why I asked that question is because I know quite a few people who I thought were Reagan Republicans or more centrist, and I'm often shocked by the whataboutism responses that are just like second nature. You know what I'm talking about, right? That's why I use the phrase almost like brainwashing. Maybe it's just because it's been proven throughout the history of maybe like in the politics in any sort of country or region, society, that if you just repeat something enough times, enough different ways, if you throw enough flavors of an idea at somebody, they can't help but just think that way. I guess that's what maybe brainwashing is.
And I would just to tack onto that, like, I almost don't know if I would characterize it as brainwashing. The older that I get, the more that I realize, like, I think anyone on this chat, like, we are all nerds. The fact that we're spending a Thursday night having a conversation about politics and like the nuances of all these this is an abnormal thing. I just want everyone on this chat to recognize that for a minute. Most people, do not think about this stuff at all. Right? That is the value of a political party, right? Because you can say, this is my tribe. I have broad values alignment with this tribe, and I'm just going to go and support them when I go into the ballot box. I don't have to spend 10, 20 hours a week keeping up with the news and trying to sort through the BS to figure out what is true and what is not. I can just kind of like love my kids, take my kids to their soccer games, go to church, show up at the ballot box once every 2 to 4 years, and vote. And so I think that when you confront people with the values conflict, because a lot of this stuff from the Republican Party, these values of limited government and fiscal responsibility, for example, these things have been baked in for 50 years. Like, a lot of these people have been their entire lives heard this from talking heads. And so you take these things that they think they believe because they've had this tribal identity for so long, and you say, well, do you really believe these things? Because this is not what's happening. Your first reaction is going to be, in most cases, unless you run into a normal person, it's going to be like that kind of cognitive dissonance reaction. It's going to be like, well, screw you. Like, well, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, what about this? What about that? And I think that this game, like this effort to make this big political realignments are really chaotic and super messy and in many cases violent in society. I think it's going to have to take time to play out. And so the one thing I will encourage people to do is not to shut down, to just continue to be kind to people, talk to them, try to show them examples. I have family members who I've said the Reagan quote to 2 years ago, and I still point back to it. Every time I find a new example of how Trump is undermining the Reagan tradition, I'm like, hey, have you seen this? I don't think Reagan would like it. I just continue to be kind and cordial and open in dialogue. I think in time it will lock in, but that's really the reason why I try to ask those 3 questions, because that strips away any sort of partisan label. It's just what are your core values as a person? And if you can kind of go down to like what their core values are and strip away all the partisanship, you can find out whether they're aligned with you or not. And one thing you'll be surprised about is you might ask people on the left that question. Like in my case, I ask people on the left those questions and I find, oh, wait, these people have not fully had their realignment locked in either, right? So it's messy, but I'd say try to be humans, try to talk to people, try to be kind. And I think in time, you might find you break through, you might not.
May I ask one short add-on? If not, I can wait.
Yeah, if you could wait, that'd be great because we've got a couple hands up. What's up? Oh, okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay, cool. I did want to point out, since you were talking about Reagan, and those were great points, Josh, because I posted a video in our community about a month or two ago of Reagan in an interview in 1984, and he was talking about the shifts between Democrat and Republican ideologies, platforms, and why he himself, who started out as a Democrat, voting for FDR, when he said he cast his first vote for FDR in 1932. To him, it was a very different Democrat Party. And then later in the 60s, he feels like that the party left him. He didn't leave the party, and he said the Republicans were going in a direction that he felt the Democrats were going earlier. And so it's like, there were certain, certain policies that he saw that were shifting from one party to another, and he just went along with the tide. Now, it wasn't like today where we have this, it's either authoritarian or you're American, because that's what it feels like, kind of. And I think Redstone brought that up. But he was still talking about being open to shifting parties wherever he felt his principles lay.
I think that's novel, right? Like, I mean, it may not have been as novel years ago. I think the party identity is like the thing that's different from now versus 100 years ago is like the parties themselves have become more national. In the past, there were a lot more regional identities that kind of rolled up into these bigger parties, and the coalitions would shift. And now it's like a lot more nationalized, which I don't think is very healthy. I also don't think the information ecosystem because of how polarized it is, makes it easy to switch parties. And I also think there's this kind of tribal nature of like, to be the guy that leaves the party, he carries with it some risk. So I do think that if you run into people that have that ability to like look at policies on their face and put their tribal identity aside, those are good people, man. Those are the kind of people you should try to, even if they disagree with you, those are the people that I think are on the right corner right now, and those are the people I think that'll succeed in the long run as the realignment plays out.
From a leadership standpoint, they seem like the rare ones out there, but they are there for sure. I agree. Jacob, you've been waiting a long time. Go for it. Jump in, man.
Hey, no, this has been an excellent, back and forth discussion here. I appreciate everyone's time. So I will say personally, I am largely in agreement with the idea that, the future of the Republican Party writ large is not positive, especially with, these nihilist Gen Z guys coming up. And I think, the I Love Hitler, Young Republican texts coming out is really indicative of that. But, there is sort of an alternative assessment here that I think, in recent, given recent events, I think merits a lot more attention. And it's, building off what Xander was talking about, I think there is a strong possibility, like a 40-60 chance that, the Republican Party and conservatism has been so hollowed out by ideas and so hollowed out of any sort of moral center that there's a good chance that, as Trump exits the stage here in a few years, there's just going to be a collapse of the GOP and conservatism writ large. And we sort of been preparing and talking about what happens if the Nat Cons or these post-liberals take control. But what happens if it, just to, speculate recklessly here a bit, what happens if, Trump and MAGA have so hollowed out conservatism in the GOP, the whole thing just collapses? what do we look at if, the GOP functionally collapses in 2028?
From your lips to God's ears, man. That's the dream. I hope that this does happen. The GOP won't go anywhere. I think it'll become a regional party. It could go in the wilderness for several decades and try to wrestle with its own identity and reinvent itself again. My concern is whatever transformation it goes into next is far worse than the current transformation. Genuinely, I think Trumpism is probably milquetoast compared to what could come next, based on the trajectory of the movement. I don't know if it does. You could see maybe the rise of stronger regional minor parties that could compete with it. You could see that the fact that it can really only win in certain regional areas. This is not unprecedented, right? I mean, I think there have been periods in time in American history where one of the parties went into multi-decade minority status, but I do think that. Okay, so like I don't operate like I don't sleep well at night, even if this happens, because even if I think this might happen, but I do think that Trump is so about his own enrichment and is so disconnected. He has no respect for his own party. He has no desire to help anyone other than himself. And he surrounded himself with sycophants that have also no desire to do anything except for enrich themselves while kind of being sycophantic to Trump. That I think that the party is going to definitely suffer deeply from this, right? Like, it's going to happen. Like, Americans are not going to look at mass men. Saw a video today of ICE, taking and pushing an American citizen, a nurse, up against a car and throwing her in the back of the van. Like, Americans are not going to look at that. They're not going to look at the unprecedented corruption that's happening. I mean, there's a reason why the No Kings protests over the last year have been the largest mass protest movement in American history. It's because, this is so antithetical to all the values of the United States. People are morally outraged. I have family members who are not politically involved that have become radicalized against this guy, right? And so I do think that the reaction is going to be very seismic. It remains to be seen what happens. I do hope that they become a minority party. That would be ideal in the short term.
Well, and there was something like George Wallace too in the early '70s. He was winning a few states to Nixon and then McGovern. I think it was sort of like a third party kind of thing. But it didn't really take off. But it was something that he was trying to build a coalition within the Republican Party 4 years prior. And
you could see a schism like that play out where you have like an America First party that kind of breaks from the Republican Party, and then they fight between each other for 2-3 cycles, and they can never win a majority. That would be ideal, and I think that that's more likely because I just genuinely in my heart of hearts do not believe that the I hate the term America First because on its face it sounds great. It's like, yeah, we should take care of Americans first. I think liberals agree that we should help out Americans. We're not. Yeah. But the Groyper version of this, which is I'd say the Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene faction of the party, those people are not a majority of the party. They're less than, I think they're 10-15%, right? And if they did split, that would be a death. That would be death for the GOP for sure.
Let's go to Xander and then Brendan. Go ahead, Xander.
So just to connect to that, to the AI piece, I guess, for a second, because we haven't really talked about AI a lot. I don't think nobody in Congress has talked about AI. There are only, in the last sitting Congress, there were only 3 engineers in them total. I was an engineer in college, magna cum laude, so I love AI stuff. But here's the thing, AI is going to transform jobs so fast, not because it's AI, but because of the technology that's moving. The companies are going to move at one speed, which is their bottom line, their bottom dollar, and they don't, because it's going to cut labor and costs, because right now there's zero regulation in play for AI, and we practically are going to need our own digital constitution just for AI governance and ethics. But the thing is you've got that movement, the technocracy, I call it the brotocracy, and then you've got the far right, white nationalism movement. These are two sort of swirling, loud movements that are independent of each other. They're not on each other's agenda. They're just each on their own agenda, like the America First, and then the technology gatekeepers. If we don't stop them, we see the jobs reports, the non-existent ones, but we're getting rumbles of the fact that they're not good. We're losing jobs at rates that we haven't seen in a very long time, and people don't realize it's the companies front loading slowly, one by one, or like in groups, offloading their workers because AI is going to do it. And people don't realize how fundamentally flawed AI actually is. Like at its very core, there is some major debugging that needs to happen before AI can do even an iota of what they think. Now, I can't speak for what the military is doing because they always get it first, but I'm talking about even the premier level AIs that everybody uses in general. The amount of mistakes that it's capable of making based on the logic system it uses right now is mind-boggling. But nobody on the far right understands it because, I mean, some of them can barely read. And the far left, they also don't like it. I think, Josh, you were talking about that weird symbiotic relationship between disaffected MAGAs and the far left, because you're right, that center left establishment, like gerontocracy, you know, Chuck Schumer and Nancy and all them, and like, you know, change the guard while the old guard is still here. Don't let them die in office. That's all I have to say. Because if you imagine that whole Senate and House or whatever, if everybody that's in that sort of 70 to 80 crowd just kind of kicks the bucket at the same time, our Congress would literally be like Swiss cheese. So I just want to throw those things out there.
Yeah, and I'll add to this, just like the way that I'm looking at the moment that we're in. We're in this. I think that we should all. I look at it as a not a negative thing. Like, I think we should all recognize that we are in some of the most unprecedented historic times in the history of the human species. Like, when the printing press showed up, it kicked off decades and hundreds of years of religious conflict, right? When these technological innovations that are so fundamental to the way that humans work and live, it creates an incredible amount of conflict and turmoil. We're in the middle of that. We're in the middle of a political realignment, which happens once a generation. We're watching these incredible technologies, and it's not just AI. I mean, we're talking about green energy. We're talking about technology that that can rewrite the human genome, and these kind of technology that can do DNA manipulation. These are all kind of happening all at the same time. This is an unprecedented moment that I don't think we've seen in the human species for 100 years, 150 years. And I agree. I don't think AI is everything it's chalked up to be, but I do think it can result in incredible efficiency gains. I don't know if it's going to result in, I don't know if we could attribute it directly to the immediate job decline that we're seeing now. I think that a lot of that stuff's overblown, but we're going to have to find a way to navigate it. But it should. I look at it as an honor to be alive during a period of time like this, because we have the ability to kind of watch this thing play out and have our own impact on history in a way. It's horrifying and also exciting at the same time.
Thanks for that, Xander. Go ahead, Brendan.
To be honest with you, I forgot why I had my hand up, but it's a pleasure to be here.
Just start a conversation.
I think I had my hand up when we were discussing political party and specifically what the future of the GOP looks like. And
thank you. Let's circle back to that.
I think Josh was bringing up a really interesting point about the history of the GOP and a possible party split. I want to remind everyone, and I'm only saying this because I'm a Republican and a history buff, so I have to throw it out there, but the Republican Party was actually a coalition party when it formed between disaffected Whig voters who no longer had a political party really to vote for anymore, and then a new political party, which Joshua kind of referenced was only successful regionally, which was the Free Soilers Party. And they were mainly in operation in the United States territories, not in the states, and their main and penultimate goal was stopping slavery. Those two groups came and formed together to create what was the Lincoln Republican Party. You're looking at a very, very similar, except much more complicated and expansive version of that now. And everyone's kind of alluded to it, especially MAGA, because MAGA is not, its own cohesive, easily defined ideology. There's a lot of things that can bring people into what MAGA is. Some of it can be I think a good example, at least here in New Jersey, is parental rights. that like that has become a buzzword specifically in New Jersey to talk about education issues and the idea that our kids are being indoctrinated. And when I actually like look at the bare bones what they want to do, it seems like they just have a problem with how librarians do jobs in New Jersey, and that needs to change, and they want them to be held legally liable if their kids or they disagree with what, you know, someone reads in a school. Like, that's ridiculous. And obviously, like, I think we can all speak from experience. I don't think there's a single book in school, especially when you get later, you know, you're in your high school, college era, that doesn't challenge you critically, or, you know, it might be violent. It might be, you know, in my case in high school, we read a lot of books that were, you know, had racist themes, and that was something that, you know, we were introduced to in literature, you know? Like, I think of To Kill a Mockingbird as a great example. Those things are now on the chopping block in you know, the free speech party, because it promotes an ideology that goes against what I guess President Trump's goal or vision for American freedom and culture is. You know, those cultural issues, they're all one and the same. And I think AI is like another form of that. You know, it's just one of those random issues that kind of, because of the internet, you get sucked into, and it's a community in itself. So once you're pulled into that community, it's like byproduct, you're already a member of MAGA. Like, I think, you know, you make a good point. The AI, like, tech bro, every single, like, AI tech bro account I've seen on X, they're a MAGA account, too. And they'll repost Marjorie Taylor Greene, or even worse now, like, Valentina Gomez, right? And that's just ridiculous to me. And I'm sitting here as a Republican operative. Like, I've worked on Republican campaigns. I just finished one. You know, I'm a Republican committee member in my area. I'm the YR chair. And I see all these things happen. I want to bring up a really good example that happened to me at a meeting that I was at yesterday. Someone who ran for council this year in my county, he was from a different town than me, but he was running for council, stood up and told everyone that the reason New Jersey Republicans lost this election was not because of, you know, Donald Trump or Jack Ciattarelli or anything like that. No, it was the problem that they didn't attack the fluoride in the water issue. Are you kidding me? And like, as a joke, I Googled, you know, just for the people around me, because a lot of them are, you know, like older folks. These people have kind of what Josh talked about earlier. They're so ingrained in their ideology in the party. They just kind of hear shit and like let it fling out the wall. So a lot of people in this room were listening to this guy talking about getting rid of fluoride in the water. And I'm sitting there like, this guy's crazy. Meanwhile, there are actual people in that room thinking this is, you know, good. It got to a point where I was so frustrated. I stood up and I was like, okay, respectfully, you have no idea what you're talking about. And if we want to debate the science, we can do this another time. But you don't know what you're talking about. Can you please sit down? And I did this in front of a group of people. You know, like, this is a Republican group of people. Especially right now in New Jersey, too, at least in the involved Republican circles, even with, like, the MAGA people, Trump's not popular right now. So even, like, the MAGA people are trying to find reasons or shortcomings with the current way the party's going to justify their losses, and it's so funny to watch them try and avoid the Trump issue. You know what I mean? As a Republican, like, I called this months ago, and I was saying it in these spaces. I was like, look, the Trump factor is going to be a big thing in New Jersey. I talked to Chris about it. I talked to Jacob about it. There's clearly a group of people in the party, and I think this is what I wanted to come down to, and this is what it relates to the original point, is right now we're in a coalition in the Republican Party with this, you know, not center-right, authoritarian, inherently young in nature too. Like, Josh makes a good point. The Gen Z crowd is very for this kind of new wing of, I guess, paleo conservatism, if you want to try to even call it conservatism, but it's not. It's more autocracy than anything. And then you have people like me, who are, you know, objectively freedom-loving Americans, grew up center-right their entire life. You know, family loved President Bush, and you know, I have a signed copy of Mitt Romney's book sitting right next to me. Like, there's those two wings of the party have to work together. And I think Josh, you know, in theory, makes a good point about, you know, the party could split again, because historically speaking, that is something that could happen. However, my fear is that with the two coalitions that we have right now, this center-right coalition that is genuinely nervous about the state of the party. And then this MAGA coalition, which is now starting to, like, I think certain people are starting to wake up and kind of realize they're not getting what they wanted. Certain people in Congress, certain people in the media, certain people on X and like, you know, I think that's slowly starting to come out, but that doesn't manifest en masse in like a month or two. You know, it's going to take even more than one election cycle. You know, just because New Jersey happened this year doesn't mean the New Jersey Republican Party is going to start thinking, oh, we're going to get rid of Trump. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but the conversations are being had now. If these conversations continue without any sort of like continued long-term development or progress, I think Joshua's right. The party will outright collapse. The coalition can't sustain itself. However, what I think is more likely to happen, and that's just because that's how the party's been operating, I'd say, the past 5 years, is you're going to have the center-right people who are like me and are probably more active and vocal about what's going on in the party and what they believe is wrong. And then you're going to have the people that don't. The people that don't are just going to stay quiet. They're going to keep staying quiet. And then you're going to notice that the MAGA people don't really have their quiet crowd. They're generally all vocal. So that's what's going to happen. And that's what's previously happened and continue to happen is, like Joshua said, even though the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Tucker Carlsons probably make up like 10% of what you think the average Republican really is, they make up the media conversation because there is just no center-right political voice in America right now. I genuinely don't think there is. And I'd like to give credit to some of my favorite Congress members, you know, like Brian Fitzpatrick or Don Bacon. Love them to death. But it doesn't change the fact that we don't have a voice for our movement. And until we do, I don't see a party split really happening because, like in Europe and like with any other democracy, party splits happen also based on personality and charisma of the leader of the party. So a party split would have to take someone just as popular as Trump right now to kind of break that mold and get the party to think, okay, splitting is worth it.
Yeah, let's let Josh go ahead and why don't you address that? There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I was
Brendan,
say
thank you.
that minority group, I think if they don't get their way, is going to burn the party down. Like, I don't think they're going to be okay with a return to a Don Bacon-esque Republican Party, right? If somebody like a Don Bacon won the nomination in 2028, they will not go along with that. They will not be team players. Whereas I think those on the center right might be more likely to kind of hold their nose and wait and see what happens. But I do think it's all going to come back down to 2028. What interesting anecdote, and I do have to head off here in about 10 minutes, but so I'll be a little brief about this. Like it's a much smaller stakes, but like I've been in the Libertarian Party for a long time, up until 2024, 2023. And the Libertarian Party for the last 15 years had a lot of these similar things going on. There was this cosmopolitan group in the Libertarian Party, these kind of classical liberal, traditional libertarian types. And there were these paleo-libertarians that in many ways were animated by very similar principles to what we see for MAGA. And what happened was the paleos took over and they ran the party into the ground and effectively destroyed it. And a lot of the people that wanted to hold their nose, that were kind of traditional CL libertarian, classical liberal libertarian types, some of them stayed, maybe similar to yourself in this analogy. Some of them left. I left at that time. But what happened in the long term was the party ate itself alive, hollowed itself out, destroyed itself, and schismed. Obviously this plays out very differently in a major party, but like when there's a fundamental disconnect from a values perspective between the two coalitional groups, the thing that I would encourage you and anyone in your camp to do is at least the very minimum. I mean, if you need to keep working and doing what you can to fight the good fight internally, that's one thing. But I will start thinking about what's the long-term plan. Like, who are the intellectually aligned allies that you could work with for another 50 years or 20 years or even 10 years? Because I think we all know in this call that those people, if you're in the Republican Party, it's not going to be the MAGA coalition. And those people have no commitment to the party. They have no commitment to conservative principles. They will sooner burn down the party before it gets into the hands of a Don Bacon type, right? They will, and they have the bullhorn. They have a lot of the power in this moment. So like coalitional, like doing coalitional work, reaching out to the center left, that's what I've spent the last 2 or 3 years doing. It's been very helpful. And it's actually given me hope in a way that I didn't think I was going to have 3 years ago when I started doing it.
And Joshua, I just wanted to clarify, because you make a good point. You were a libertarian kind of at like the Joe Jorgensen time. Like the prime time to be a libertarian, I think, in the most recent era was like 2016 through 2020. You know, like that was the vibe, I felt like. And then I voted for Joe Jorgensen in 2020. I'll put that out there. You know, as a Republican, I voted for Joe Jorgensen in 2020. I didn't bite the bullet and vote for Chase Oliver in 2024.
I did not either.
So
yeah,
I think it's very interesting to see that, and you know, you make a great point about the Libertarian Party. It is very, very synonymous to what is happening to the Republicans right now. It's practically the same. It's
identical.
Yeah.
It's identical. You're completely correct. It's been shocking to me, actually, not to cut you off, but I'll say that experience, what I saw happen in the Libertarian Party from 2020 to 2023, it's almost surreal, because it was the same thing that is happening in the Republican Party 2 years later. And I don't know, you know, I don't want to sound elitist or whatever, but like I feel like I learned some lessons from that experience. What I should have done was I should have stepped away earlier, and I should have sought out new allies, and I should have found values alignment with the people I was working with. But because I'd spent 15 years, I mean, I worked for Congressman Amash. I was like animated by Joe. I was the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Tennessee, one of the most successful state affiliates in the country. Like I had a lot bought into that party. And when the paleo insurgency happened, I felt like, well, I need to stay here for 2 years and fight this fight. And in retrospect, I learned a lot of lessons from that. But like, I wish if I could go back and rewrite history, I would have gone back in 2021 after the Joe Jorgensen campaign and the paleo insurgency started, and really sat down and asked myself, like, what are the values of the people? Like, what are the core fundamental values of the people I'm working with right now? Are they aligned with my long-term vision from a political organizing perspective? And I wish I would have like saved myself 2 years. Obviously, hindsight's 2020, but you're completely correct. Like, it was a mini version in the Libertarian Party of what happened in the Republican Party, and it's been very shocking to see it, because it was the exact same thing that played out, and it was surprising. It caught me off guard.
I'll leave it on this last point. I find it very interesting, because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you were actually a Libertarian Party member at the time, I feel like it happened a lot quicker in the Libertarian Party than it happened in the Republican Party, in terms of like how quickly the Lawbertarians, or like those paleo libertarians, were able to quickly organize and coalesce. Like, I feel like even to this day, MAGA, as much as you give Trump credit and, you know, the MAGA movement credit for being able to organize like on social media and things like that, generally I notice in person, when it comes to their grassroots efforts, they barely scrape by the Democrats, you know, just barely. Even here in Jersey, like there are times when it's sad to go to an event and look at the Republican table and the Democrat table. You know what I mean? Like it's night and day.
I will say that it may seem like that from the outside, and I this may be an entire Twitter Spaces conversation that I could have, because I could talk about this for hours. But like, I knew the organizer of the Mises Caucus for years, because he started the Mises Caucus in 2017 when the chairman of the Libertarian Party basically came out and denounced the Charlottesville. I don't know if you remember this, but like the chairman, Nick Sarwark came out and basically said, we denounce bigotry. And then the week later, after the Charlottesville protest, the Paleos founded this caucus. They had been organizing and failing. Like, they had candidates that got 20-30% of the vote for like 3 conventions, 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, this has been going on for like 7 or so years, that they were building and building and building. And I actually posted a whole thread about this in 2024 that kind of went viral. But like, what really happened, and my theory is it's all connected. My theory is that like in 2020, when Trump lost, some political analysts down the chain looked at the fact the Libertarian Party covered the spread in, like, I think it was Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia, because the Libertarian candidate got like Joe Jorgensen got like enough to cover the spread between Trump and the Democrat, and they just said, hey, look, it takes less than $500,000 to take over the Libertarian Party. And between the years of 2021 and 2023, the Mises PAC and the Paleos, they received about $250,000 in PAC funding, which is really unprecedented for the Libertarian Party. I mean, nobody invests that kind of money in the party.
That is very impressive for the Libertarians.
Yeah. And they raised that, and they systematically took over every state affiliate, and then they had Trump as their speaker as the keynote in 2024. So, like, I honestly, I mean, it's anecdotal, but like, I do think that there was outside money from the MAGA machine that came in to try to destroy the party from the inside. And that also might make sense as to why there's so much value alignment, right? Like, these people were actually saying these weird, like the anti-immigrant, really weird pseudo-scientific RFK proto stuff that was happening in the party and Libertarian Party in 2022 is the same shit that was mainstreamed in 2024. So
we're going to try and squeeze in the rest of these guys here. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just stepped on you.
Oh, you're good. Go for it.
Okay, go ahead, Ian. You're up.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, I also had some involvement with my my local libertarian group. But this was a while ago though, and the reason I was getting involved was to try to convince fellow members of the party to support a Bill Weld ticket. I mean, he was Gary Johnson's running mate back in 2016. At the time, I was very excited for the future of the party. I thought there was real potential for the party to become actually like competitive at a congressional level, getting people elected in the House at the very least. So I was trying to convince people to support a Bill Weld candidacy, and the support was just not there. I mean, you bring up a good point. Like, if a party isn't willing, if, say, the Republican Party isn't willing to support liberalism, being a part of the party isn't going to change that. I guess we either have to accept reality or keep living in falsehoods. Like, I mean, there are still some good people in the party, and it's not to say that there zero Republicans support liberalism. I think there's still a lot of people who do. If you look at the primaries, it was about 20% of people who voted for Nikki Haley. Like, there's still some stuff there, but it's really a matter of just. I guess accepting reality, especially when it comes to third parties too, because the Libertarian Party, I think what happened with the Mises Caucus and all that support for just hardcore paleoconservatism to a point where they basically just endorsed Trump last year. I mean, if you really look at what the Libertarians did last year, it was basically a shadow endorsement of Trump. But if you really look into the party and the people involved, material support for someone like Bill Weld. I mean, that's what I was trying to get support for back then, and this was a while ago. But that material support wasn't there, and it was never going to be there. So at a certain point, especially in the liberalism versus illiberalism battle that we currently have in our political system, it really is just a matter of accepting where the circumstances on the ground are at this particular moment.
In the same way we have to put partisanship aside, we have to kind of really be aware and acutely aware of the sunk cost fallacy in our own work. Because if we don't, we risk missing what is an existential moment. It's like a big decision point, and we don't have the luxury of waiting around for several years. Like, this is the moment that I think we have to put our cards on the table. I will say how happy I am to meet another Bill Weld stan, because dude, like, I was whipping votes for Bill Weld to be the nominee in 2020. That was my dream. I was sitting next to Bill Weld during the 2018 Libertarian National Convention, because we were in the Tennessee delegation. It was right next to the Massachusetts delegation, and Bill Weld was sitting literally right beside me the entire convention. And I watched him get booed and called out, and people walking by his table just saying mean things to him. And I was honestly appalled. And that was the moment where I started to think, I was like, this party's not serious. Like, it's not. And then he did not, he stepped away from the party, I think, a couple months after that. So, but for what it's worth, I went up to him afterwards and told him I wanted him to run for president, but he didn't. That was a minority position at the time.
I think he would have run for the nomination, for the Libertarian nomination, in 2020 if there was any support
Yep.
there. I mean, it's really disappointing because if he actually did, I think the party could have broken 5%, got the matching funds, everything that went along with the actual battle for relevancy. But you're right, the party itself just turned into this kind of pseudo activist group that really, I mean, definitely now, especially, just isn't concerned about winning elections, getting any sort of functional support for the party, but just grandstanding and developing this very closed off echo chamber. Yeah, it's really sad how the party shut off Bill Weld, Gary Johnson, anyone who held any sort of elected office, and now has just kind of become this echo chamber. Because there was a short time when the party had real potential for becoming a mainstream third party.
Yeah, 2016 to 2018 was a very inspirational period for me. That honestly is really what kind of put a fire under my ass to get involved in organizing. It is a shame, but things change.
Xander,
maybe one day.
Xander, go ahead and jump in.
Oh yeah, so I just wanted to add in, like I think somebody just mentioned it, and I was like, oh, that's what I was gonna say. That we don't have the luxury of like half-assed responses right now, because I think everybody knows with everything at stake, and like this idea that you have to be a registered Democrat tomorrow to vote for, I'm just exaggerating for drama's sake, but to be on the right side, it's like 50% of the electorate is independent. They're not going either way. They're not going to switch right now either way, because neither team has an actual game plan that works. We're calling what's on the right populism, but it's like, it's not populism when they're picking the unpopular thing to do. It's like, okay, if populism looks at the percent of the audience that agrees, and it's like 90% one way, they're like, we're just going to go the other way for no reason, like switching to Russia over Ukraine. It's just bizarro. But what I was going to say is that I hope the Democrats take a better attitude towards accepting other people, because like you said, it is weird that some of the defects from MAGA are going to the progressive side of the Democrats, but it's because the gerontocracy, Chuck Schumer and the Jeffries guy, they're not it. They are not it. And I know that everybody outside of New York hated Mamdani, but to be honest, that's what made us vote for him. Like, to be 100% honest, was everybody's telling New York that we can't elect him because of whatever reason. It didn't matter. Like, he could have been everything they said he was, and he's not. But he could have been. People were calling him like a terrorist and a jihadist, and I'm like, what in the world is wrong with these people? He's been in local government for like years. But anyways, if they take a better acceptance of all those people, because they're going to need every vote they can next time around, and telling people that don't switch over to be a Democrat, or telling people that came from MAGA, I know it's going to be a hard conversation, but hey, if they come over to the side, welcome them in. They've got to bite their tongue at some point and say the W needs to happen, period. This is like the last shot. Not 2026 per se, but yes, it would be nice to stop the bleeding in 2026. But like, yeah, I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, man, new leaders and like channeling populist energy for liberal ends. That's the dream. I agree, though. You can't continue with the status quo. I'm not very happy with the leaders of the Democratic Party right now either, for what it's worth.
We had one new speaker that wanted to get a comment in real quick. Stalker.
Hello, thank you, and just for this talk, and I want to say thank you, Joshua, for the conversation. I think that you have some very good points, especially for
sorry about that. This is the official reboot of this game, by the way. It's,
the
Black Mesa.
takeover of the Mises colleges over the overall authoritarian party in general in the United States was, in my opinion, very just horrible. Not only for the ideology in general, but also for our country and for the world in general. So I want to say thank you for your comments and all that. The only thing I really want to ask you on is, in a theoretical world where, let's just say, both the Republicans and the Democrats, I'm not saying this is happening right now, but in a world where if like both parties become very illiberal, would you? I'm not saying would you support, but would you think it would be a good idea to have a dedicated liberal party that includes both classical liberals and social liberals, and even some of the libertarians are the pragmatic libertarians, like the paleo libertarian types, to just being one massive coalition party? Like, would that be like a idea like the FDP in Germany, for example? That could be a good example, like a dedicated liberal party. Would that be like a interesting idea for you? I'm not saying, oh, we gotta do this or it should be done. I'm just simply saying, like, is that just ever like a thought that comes through your head?
Oh yeah, and recognizing that I'm gonna have to jump here in a minute. Let me say this: when the first thing that we did when I started Project Liberal PAC in 2023 was we tried to organize effectively a schism in the Libertarian Party to split off into a liberal party. And what was birthed, I can't take credit for what its current form is, but there is a liberal party that was formed in that effort. It was Liberal Party USA. You can look them up on Twitter. I think their website's liberalpartyusa.org. They do exist. They're trying to realize the vision that you described. I worked with them a bit in my transition away from the Libertarian Party in 2023 to help them get off the ground. The reason why I'm not fully in on them, I mean, I still support them, and many, like the chairwoman of the party is a very good friend of mine. But like and I told her this, I do not think that's the strategy for the moment. Like, I think we need to try to build a constituency on the left, to your point, and we need to try to see if we can beat left-wing populism. But in the long run, if like the Democratic Party becomes just as liberal as the right, which I don't think is going to happen in the next 4 years by any means, but if it does in the next 10 or 20 years, we do need to have an alternative for sure. The only problem is minority, like it's much easier to go in and reform and reshape an existing party than it is to form a new party and come from the outside. You have to have a lot of funding. The ballot access initiatives is another thing I could talk about for a long time. If you're a minority party and you're starting, you have to spend millions of dollars to just get your name on the ballot. And that's not even including like, what are your incentives to get a candidate to like run with your party label? So like when I've talked to my friends at the Liberal Party and talked to them about their short-term strategy, the thing that I've encouraged them to do is like, hey, you know, go into rural areas where Republican candidates are running unopposed, run on a free markets, free movement, free, individual liberty, pro 2A in these rural areas campaign, hit them from their right flank, and see what you can do where the Democratic Party is not competitive. So like if, for the Liberal Party, I think they are doing this in some states like Wyoming, for example, and Utah. But like, I do think that in the long term, that would be a good backup plan. Yeah, for sure. But
yeah,
you can take it a day at a time.
Sorry, Joshua. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I already knew the Liberal Party already existed, so I'm not like, oh, you don't know everything, because obviously, you don't know me, so it's just kind of like a. But yeah, I already know that. But thank you about that. It's just that, yeah, I fully agree with you. It's like, I'm just kind of like, hey, I wish in America we did have multi-party system where, for example, going back to my whole idea of Germany with like the FDP, where it could, it goes sometimes back and forth from the CDU, CSU to the SPD, and like it'll like kind of join coalitions to get its goals to happen. And it's like, hey, we're going to compromise here and there if it means we could get these liberal policies, these liberal ideals, and these liberal goals within the establishment government and how things are going. And it's just kind of like, I wish hopefully one day that could happen here in America. It's just that, it's like, hey, the issue is just right now, where are we at? And it's just kind of like the issue. And one thing I really do like with Project Liberal is teaching people that liberalism isn't synonymous with this left-wing like type. Because the things in America, when you hear the word liberal, you think, oh, you're the type that would have been like, pro DSA and it's kind of funny. I explain people like I'm pro like all this stuff, and they're like I say I'm pro 2A, and they're like, what? How you can say you're a liberal and pro 2A, and I start going down about like classical liberalism, like all its ideas, like ideology, and it's kind of like, I'm glad y'all do exist, because that's a huge issue, especially in the overall zeitgeist and how people approach politics. And I'm glad that there's specifically organizations that dedicate themselves to focusing on Gen Z, because we are the future end day. Like boomers, they're still the political backbone, but one day, you know, we all kind of know it's just going to be, you know, us in charge. And I'm just glad, you know, you're doing the good work. You're doing the Lord's work, and I want to thank you about that.
Hey, I appreciate the encouragement, man. And you're completely correct. Gen Z is going to run the world. So it's only a matter of time.
Oh,
The one thing I'll say, the one last thing I'll say on your multi-party thing, I've thought a lot about this, is until we get rid of the first past the post plurality takes all voting system that we have in the United States, which like if there are 3 candidates and one gets 36%, the other gets what 33 and 32 or whatever, then they win. Until we get rid of that, it's going to be really hard for a third party to get ahead. Like there's a reason why European countries have multi-party systems, is because their voting systems, have this, like it's usually elected by proportional representation. So you can actually have that happen. So like one of the things I'm super passionate about is we need to find a way to have districts that are elected in Congress proportionally. I'm a big fan of like ranked choice voting, approval voting, and those alternative systems. I think anything like that would be great. If you can pass that in the United States, then you could see the ascendance of a third party. I really appreciate the encouragement.
I know you have to leave. It looks like we have, I promised this guy one more. He said he had one comment. So Redstone, you get the last word. Go ahead. And then Ian and I will wrap up.
Agree on those last points. And like Germany's political system was brought up. Their parliament has like 635 members, and Germany is like a quarter the size population of the United States. We have like 430 in the House. There's something seriously wrong with the system as it's set up, and a lot does need to change. I mean, that's a long-winded conversation, right? But I just wanted to. That was one of the things I just wanted to say.
Yeah, completely correct. Could not agree more. We need to uncap the House too, while we're at it. Get some more, increase the size. We could have 1,000 members in the House. It would not be a problem. But yeah, a whole nother conversation.
Well, we appreciate this conversation, Josh. Thanks for spending as much time with us tonight as you did. I think this has been a great call. I noticed too that you partnered up with us and it's like we're being simulcast on Project Liberal. So thank you. There's actually more people listening there than there are here. In fact, that jumped up to about 280 or something like that in the last few minutes.
Shout out to our director of ops, Warren, who is, I think, simultaneously gaming while we.
Sorry.
Another time that one of us tuned in, Project Liberal, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting, and it was some guy gaming. And you guys,
man, we're taking the Gen Z outreach seriously. I don't know about you guys, and I'm a millennial, but like it's so much easier to like listen to long form conversation when you're watching somebody like wreck someone in a video game.
Too bad you guys don't get to watch.
Is he playing Doom?
Just struggle. Black Mesa.
I don't know what he's playing.
Black Mesa. Half-Life.
Well, Josh, you can still hear us, right?
Yeah, I would say I think it's Black Mesa. I was introduced to this game by him. I've actually never seen it before. But he's been streaming it for a couple weeks.
Okay, gotcha. So, Ian, do you have any other comments you wanted to throw in for the benefit of the discussion?
This game, though, man. Everyone's like watching now, and I'm trash.
Hello to everyone else listening on the stream, playing whatever video game it is. Good luck. Best of luck to you, Matt. And yeah, great space. Great space talking about. I guess that the broader battle between liberalism and illiberalism. I mean, that's what this all comes down to. I mean, whether or not we can form a big tent coalition to unite the left alongside the center-right into performing an electable strategy to maintain liberalism. I mean, that's just what this is all about. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully we can do this again in less than a year. But
I hope so
yeah.
too. I hope so too, because when you come on, I mean, it just fits right in with our discussions anyway, too. So it's.
I just want to say this too. I always really enjoy chatting with you guys because it feels kind of like home to me. Like I feel like I've been. I mean, again, I can't get rid of my roots. Like I've been on the center right my whole
lot
life.
of politicians
so I
are
get in
feeling
these new
stupid. You are
spaces and I'm
correct
like,
about that.
I
I think
feel like
Marcia
a
Taylor
minority
is
here. But when I come to these
significantly
chats, it feels
smarter
like
than she
home.
puts
So
on,
thanks for
for the
inviting me.
record.
Oh, of course. No,
Not all of
you
them
are
are.
welcome
Some of them
anytime.
are really
you
just
can
dumb.
drop in just to you see a space
But
happening on a Saturday night or something. And,
some of them are feigning
you
stupidity
don't have
for
family
sure.
obligations. Just hop in. You're here. You're welcome anytime. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks a lot. All right.
I'm also going to call
Ian,
it here,
thank
you
you
guys.
for co-hosting, and Jacob also wherever he's gone. Thank you, Jacob. We appreciate you.
I'm going
And
in
we will
circles.
be back here Saturday night at 8:30 with our regular spaces on the weekends. So Saturdays at 8:30 is when we're on too. So we will see all you guys this Saturday.
I'm going to call
Take
it
it
as
easy.
well, you guys. Just wanted to be there for Josh. Hopefully you enjoyed listening in. Glad that they were cool with the simulcast. And we will return likely Monday. Maybe we'll do something over the weekend. We'll see. But likely Monday. We are pretty consistent on Mondays. All right, squad. Thanks so